Hey, Stacy and Andy. I'm a devout listener of your podcast, and I'm hoping you can help me. The organization I founded has been around for 20 plus years, and we are struggling to keep our very important mission going from a volunteer standpoint. We rely on those who come through our programs to become our volunteers, but it seems that people no longer want to make long-term commitments to serve, even though they have been helped. Can you help us figure out how to overcome this ever-growing inertia?
I want to challenge the person who wrote this question I want to challenge the person to think about whether it's truly inertia, right? Is it an inertia problem? Or is it something more about the way your volunteer program is designed? And I know that's a hard pill to swallow, but when I saw this question, I just kept thinking about the fact that people oftentimes, when they have had a volunteer program, for example, in this case, that has worked for years, and then maybe over the last however many years, we're not sure how long this quote inertia has been happening, right? Like there's this inertia happening, and so many times it's pointing at like, okay, is this inertia, like, is it the outside world? What kind of like gimmicks do we need to do to get people in? Is it just the state of our society? Versus looking at, maybe we really need to shift and look internally at what is our volunteer program about, right? Like, what is our engagement about? Because maybe we need to look at doing things different. So you've always tried to recruit from people who went through the program to be your volunteers, which is cool. But maybe that's not working anymore. So could you look for a broader base of volunteers? Could you change it up? And so I feel like that's what I would want to start with if I were in the shoes of the person who wrote this, right? Like, let's try to separate ourselves and let's do some research. I mean, there's some good research out there with some of the different organizations around the country that talk about volunteerism and what types of volunteerism is working these days and what types of programs are working, and generationally how that changes. Because Andy, you and I both know, I mean, they're saying younger generation is really very much into hands-on, wants to see the impact, doesn't want to sit in these, kind of boring board meetings. Like, that's not their interest. So like, they're not interested in board seats always, but they are interested in getting their hands dirty. So like, I guess I would say, like, layer the data of what has been done out there already about what's working, and then like layer it with looking at your program, and then think about, is there a redesign or something you need to tweak about your program? So it's not just this like, oh my gosh, nobody is interested. I know, but everyone's apathetic. I don't know. Maybe I'm taking this too far, but the inertia, it just feels a little like it's an external lens instead of looking internally. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's what's the joke that somebody goes into the doctor and the doctor says, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this," and the doctor says, "Stop doing that."
Yeah.
If you see something, I mean, I think in terms of volunteering, you absolutely have to look at what it is. And it's exactly what Stacy just said, which is, what do volunteers want to do? And how can you connect that up with what you need volunteers to do? Are there artificial barriers that you've got in place that are preventing people from volunteering? So one of the things that I've seen is that we needed a lot of volunteers, and we needed them during like working hours. So we had this big, we're at work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and that's when we need help. So we need volunteers to come in 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But lots of people have jobs, or their kids are in school and they need to drop them off at 9 and pick them up at 2. So that like, that might not be a really good way to get people that aren't already retired to volunteer for you, is to see if do we shift the volunteer hours to be when people are available. One of the other things we did is one of the things that we had a challenge with is that certain activities couldn't be done by people under the age of 16. It was just too dangerous. There's forklifts moving around. There's all kinds of activities happening. I don't want a 12-year-old to run over I mean, a 12-year-old could probably deal with it, but like an 8-year-old, I don't want running around the warehouse. They're going to get squashed, right? It's a dangerous place.
Yeah.
So what we did is we figured out, and I didn't do that, pretend like it's my idea, that what our super fantastic volunteer team decided is that they needed to figure out a way to get these people engaged as well. And so they said, bring the whole family. If you're under the age of 16, you can work with our volunteer team to help write thank you notes. And they would color and they would say, thank you for bringing the delicious food that we were able to serve. They were able to write thank you cards and color them and do all this fun work that then got sent off to donors just as like a random thank you, right? And the kids were enjoying it. And it also provided like basically free childcare. So we could get volunteers in to do what we needed done while their kids were occupied with something entertaining, which is like, as a parent, you're like, yeah, I want to do that. Right. This is you're like, that's a built-in day. I don't have to think about what else to do with them. They're just going to be entertained coloring.
Yeah,
it does. So like, think about like what, I would have conversations with your current volunteers and say, we see that people are volunteering less often. Why is it? And you may have already done this. It may be like, oh my gosh, the volunteer manager is a harpy and we just don't want to go in because we're tired of being yelled at, right? Or whatever it is. There may be something else that you need to fix. It could be that it's boring. It could be that it's really hard work and you've scheduled people for shifts that are too long. There are lots of reasons that volunteering is not working out, and you probably just need to figure out a way to address that. It doesn't mean that all volunteering is going to be like a party all the time, but you could probably make it at least entertaining and fun for the people so that they feel like when they're done with it, they've like done good work and enjoyed themselves and made a difference in the community. That's really what you need to do.
I also love, I like your idea about talking to existing volunteers, but I also think getting some of your longtime volunteers who've stopped volunteering, or if you have any of those and they would be willing, right? Talk to them or bring them together and say, why did you stop volunteering? This is not us trying to badger you. We're trying to understand it because we're trying to refresh our volunteer program. And what worked? What do you think we could have done better? And I think that's a really great way of kind of co-creating what that new program looks like with the people who know best. We're the first time end users as the volunteers of the program, as well as your current volunteers. It could be super eye-opening. So you'll have to get back to us and let us know what you find out.
Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board. Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing. Nonprofit resources.
Welcome to Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where hosts Andy Shurick and Stacy Wedding answer your questions about all things nonprofit.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Everything. I'm Andy Shurick. I'm here with Stacy Wedding, and we're here to talk about nonprofit stuff. You send us questions. You could do that on the Nonprofit Everything website, which is nonprofiteverything.com, and click the big yellow. I found out it's yellow the other day. The big yellow ask a question button. It was orange for a while. I don't know why I changed it. I just felt...
You just felt like it? You were in a yellow kind of mood? Okay.
I guess. I like yellow. Yellow's kind of the theme color for the podcast. Or you can just email us at questions@nonprofiteverything.com, and that'll get straight to us, and we'll put them in the queue and answer them as we get them. I know we've seeded a couple of questions in the last few episodes too. So we asked one thing, and some people were sending these in, which is great, which is send us a question that you hope someone else would ask. Like if you've got a coworker or a board member and you're like, they really need to know this thing, so I'm going to phrase a question that they might have asked. We love those too, because then we can answer them. And then you could be like, Stacy and Andy said this, so maybe you should stop arguing with me about it. We'll argue. We'll be your arguing proxies. Stacy, this one's for you. Is there a good reason the executive director should not be on the board?
I'm going to start with some context for listeners so they can be aware of the three different kind of models out there for this, and then we'll dive into the answers. So there's oftentimes what you'll see is an executive director that serves as an ex officio on the board, doesn't have a voting authority, they are on the board just by way of their position as executive director. But again, they don't have voting authority. So that's very common, and we see that a lot in the nonprofit sector. There's also executive director is a voting member of the board, and that is less common, but still exists. There's nothing prohibiting that. And the executive director is not on the board at all, which is also what I tend to see fairly typically, fairly more of as well. I think a lot of this can depend on the size of the organization again, and the level of the number of employees. But as far as is there a good reason the executive director should not be on the board? I feel like there's a few different things to think about with that, because I think you can make the case that it's the cleanest separation of governance and management when they are not on the board, right? It is truly like the board is there to govern, and the executive. Now, I would argue that executive directors still have some role in governance. So that is where I think this gets a little squishy. But an executive director truly is like the daily operations, right? The staff is daily operations oversight. Let's make this machine and our nonprofit run well and efficiently. And the board is looking at policy and risk management and larger generative issues and helping partner with the ED on strategy. And so like theoretically, right? So there's kind of like the governance versus management. And so I think if you want it like really super clean, no question marks, right? No inherent conflict of interest in any board decision making, then that's the case for having the executive director not be on the board. Because, it's, you and I've seen it, Andy, you get a really powerful executive director and someone who is a savvy leader and is pretty much running the organization, and the board is just saying, yep, whatever you say, rubber stamp, not like asking any of the thoughtful questions, not maybe providing an alternative perspective, not digging a little deep, because the board just trusts them so much. And I love when you see a really strong leader. So we want strong leaders, but I also think what can happen is if you already have an organization where the board is deferring to your executive director, and then the executive director sits on the board, that is just and has a vote on the board. They're only one vote. So let's be honest, like they can be outvoted, but that vote carries a heavier weight, is what I would argue, than every other board member's vote, because of that trust relationship deference that can tend to happen, sort of, sometimes just lazy governance. Like, sure, that person seems to know what they're talking about, right? Like, let's go with it. And so I think, again, and I think it's clear accountability structure with distinct roles and responsibilities when you have kind of like an ED that is not on the board. So that's the case for not having an ED on the board. I think we could also make the case for having the ED be on the board, and it would be probably the flip side of all that. But I don't know. That's what my gut tells me. I will also say, just like from a governance perspective and sort of governance experts and consultants out there, including Board Source, which is one of those national resource on best practices, research, trends on nonprofit boards. Board Source actually does not advocate for an executive director having, or a CEO having, a vote on the board. Board Source advocates either most often for an ex officio role, so that there is still a voice into board decision making and helping the board see all viewpoints, but there is no power to influence or to vote and to change the outcome. So that's just by way of background for our listeners. What do you think, Andy?
I agree 100%. And I was thinking, you mentioned about the voting, so if the executive director has a vote, and I think we would both agree that you should never bring something to the board as a executive director that you don't already know the outcome of.
Yeah.
You never want to bring something that they could say yes or no. But imagine you're in a scenario where it's not quite as well managed. If the executive director has a vote and everybody on the board votes yes, but the executive director votes no, like what's going to happen next? It just feels like it's sort of a recipe for instant conflict. And I think for me, like the way I would like to interact with boards, like I don't want to have any conflict. I want everybody to be on the same page, and like basically all of the business needs to be transacted before the meeting happens so that we can just like knock through the things that need to be voted on and talk about fun things like what we're going to do next. I think that's a better way to go. Do you think, my question for you, Stacy, do you think it's different for small organizations and big organizations? Is there because we see many founder-led organizations where the founder is on the board and potentially is a voting member because it's their organization and they feel like they need that level of control. Do we see is it part of adolescence where you start to take some of that board voting responsibility away? Because you and I agree that the board should never get into operational things, and the executive director should be the barrier between staff and the board. So like everything should direct the executive director to then tell the staff to do something. And as soon as you make that executive director a board member, that whole system just breaks down.
Yeah. No, it totally does. I mean, I think you see it, to your point. I think in small organizations, grassroots, particularly those that have no paid staff, and it's a working board, but the board is also having to hold operational roles voluntarily, right? There's not a lot of way around that unless you can find other board members or something or people who just want to volunteer their time as staff members who aren't on the board, right? I think it's kind of inherent in that grassroots model where this gets really tricky. But I do think, to your point, adolescent phase is where you start to see that stuff start to evolve, because now there's staff, and now it's like there is paid staff, and now there's this clear delineation where it becomes difficult to kind of govern the way you always did before. And I think that's why we always say adolescence, that's a really messy stage for nonprofit boards, because if, for example, you've got a founder, as you suggested, that has always been on the board and always had voting authority, and now it's like, you're now actually a paid executive director of this organization. We need to relook at this. I think there are sometimes issues with that, right? Like, I know. I mean, they don't want to give up that level of control. And we all know founders have plenty of power and control without even needing a board seat. I'm sorry, I'm just going to make that case right here. You don't need a board seat.
True.
So if you're a founder listening to this, don't panic about it, because let me tell you, everyone always, no matter how you try to structure the organization, there is this inherent look at the founder to see what they think and what they're saying, like out of respect. I don't know, like it's this cultural thing, but I also go, oh, it's so unhealthy, and it's what creates the founderitis we hear about in all those books that are out there. Andy, this one's for you. I had a disagreement with one of our fundraisers whether we should provide a tax receipt for payment for a particular program. We organize an educational trip as part of our mission and charge for it. The amount we charge is more than the direct costs we are charged. Indirect costs like staff time are not considered. My fundraiser said we should be receipting the buyers for this purchase since we are charging more than the direct costs. I thought for things like this, payments for services, that there was no tax deductibility because it's not a donation but a payment, and the fair market value of goods and services received is whatever we charge for the trip anyway. Should we be providing tax receipts for this? And if so, should we be considering indirect costs like staff time when we figure out the fair market value? Or is there another different option or possibility I'm not considering?
I love this question because it's like technical detail.
Oh,
right?
But it comes so back detailed. Thank God you're we're co-host, Andy, because my eyes are like crossing because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so detailed.
I love it. I love it. It's so great. It's got
It's a
tons of
great
information.
question. It's a great
And
question.
it's got drama, right? Because we've got the finance team and the development team trying to have a conversation with each other. And they're like, yeah, but it's this. Yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but this, right?
Yeah.
It's the perfect question. Thank you so much. So luckily the answer is pretty easy. So one of the things that I think we've said it a couple of times today, is one of the things about accounting is that there are rules, and the rules are very clear, and they can be applied whether development wants them to be applied or not. Unfortunately, I think we're going to hurt development's feelings on this one, because the rules about fair market value, and this isn't just nonprofits, this is every corporation. So what fair market value is how much someone would pay like in a completely disinterested transaction. So like, what would this thing be worth on the open market? So sometimes it's hard to figure out. Sometimes it's not, if you're doing something that's so specific that there's only like, you're the only people that do it. So there might not be a way to figure out exactly what it is. But usually you would say like, what would this thing cost if somebody just had to buy it? And that's the fair market value. And then anything over fair market value could be considered a tax deductible donation on top of it. In this case, we don't really have enough information to say whether or not, what you're paying for direct services like may be enough. But you just have to look at somebody else and say, what would you pay for this if this were like in real life? And that's the fair market value. I would suspect in this case, probably what you're charging for the program is less than fair market value, in which case there wouldn't be any tax deductible portion at all. So the analog is the silent auction, right? We see, so this is like for somebody that's not in this exact scenario, the silent auction is a really good example. And so if somebody goes and buys something at a silent auction, like, do they get a tax receipt for it? And the answer is almost always no, unless what they paid for the thing is more than it's worth. And what it's worth is subject to accounting rules. And I'll put the link to the actual part of the code that says how you calculate fair market value. I'll put that in the show notes so that you can use this and pull it out of your back pocket when you say, I'm sorry, we can't, because this is the rule and we have to stick to this rule. And then how can we help you as a development team understand, folks, that like tax deductibility isn't necessarily something that you get when you buy something. So, that's the other conversation that we need to have to be able to be clear about it. I had years ago, a community member started to do a fundraiser where she would book like a room at a hotel, and then she would have people come in, and I think she did like, I don't remember what it was, but I think it was like a spa day. And she'd have people come and they'd pay for the spa day in this hotel. And she like set it all up and she did all the work and everything like that. And then she she gave a portion of the proceeds to us from her spa day that she just done by herself without talking to us. And then she said, oh, by the way, can you send a tax receipt to all of the people that paid me to come to the spa day? And I had to say, and I made her furious. I had to say, that's not how it works. Right. Like the value of a spa day is X and you charged them X. So they paid for what they got, so that there's no, regardless of the fact that you gave us money,
right?
Like you can get a tax deduct because we had nothing to do with it. We'll write you a tax receipt for the, $4,000 or whatever. It wasn't even that much. I don't remember. It was whatever this amount of money was that you gave us. That was a donation from you. That has nothing to do with any of the people that paid for the spa day. And she was so mad. I actually she called me and she screamed at me, and I actually had to get one of our board members who was an attorney to sit on the call with me while we had that conversation with her, because at this point we were burning bridges permanently with this woman because she just thought that the rules were crazy. And I'm just like, but that's it's not my rule. Right. It's like if you're going to be mad at somebody, be mad at the IRS because it's the IRS's rule. You're like,
don't kill the messenger, right?
Yeah. All I have to do is like tell you what the rule is. And I'm sorry that I can't do that, but it's not my decision to make. So it's the same kind of scenario where the value is the value, and it's what someone would pay on the open market.
So then the question about, should they consider like indirect costs like staff time when they figure out the fair market value? I'm assuming the answer is no, because that's not like the open market doesn't do that either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I mean, think about it. Like your indirect costs and your staff time, you're a nonprofit, so you're paying everybody under market anyway. So like if they were like, let's just, I mean, I don't know what the actual scenario is, but let's say it's a cruise. Like you just find a similar thing and say, like, if you were going to pay for this cruise, it would cost $10,000 a person or what? I don't know. I don't do cruises. I don't know what they cost. $10,000 per person or whatever. So if you paid $10,000, that's the fair market value. Like if you're charging them extra, like if you're going to say, you know, the cruise would normally cost $10,000, we're going to charge you $20,000 and 10% of it is a tax benefit. Like most people would say no, because that's like seems like a bad deal. Because now we're in the world of exchange transactions where you're selling something to someone, they're buying it from you. And so all of a sudden their exchange transaction, like the daily, like, how much is this really worth thing clicks in. The same thing that makes silent auctions suck is that piece of your brain clicks in and it's no longer a philanthropic gift that you're giving because it makes you feel good. It's I'm getting something from you, which means that you're going to be locked down to whatever fair market value or lower a lot of times.
I have to just say, this is a random side note that has nothing to do with the question, but what you just said is so true, Andy. I don't think people realize when they spend all this energy on a silent auction that it actually doesn't fulfill the charitable like part of my brain. Like, so I'm incredibly charitably inclined. And when I get into that moment, I am like, I want to get this for less than it's worth. I want to like it's like I separate. It doesn't matter, no matter how much I care about the cause. It just like triggers that part of my brain, and I know, like to your point, I'm not alone. So it's a real issue.
It's science. It's just science.
Yeah.
And so opera companies have had this challenge forever. Is that operas are expensive to produce, especially in the 21st century. Operas are so expensive to produce. There is no way that you could charge people like how much it would cost to cover the cost of an opera. Like tickets would be $4,000 a piece and no one would go. And so that completely defeats the purpose. If you're going to just like do it and nobody shows up, like then why did we even bother? So what happens is you need to have a fundraising mechanism that fills in the gap so that this thing can exist. And even the filthy rich people that are in the golden circle at the front of the theater, you know, they're getting spit on during the aria. Like, don't sit there. I would never sit there. Have you gone to the opera before? Like there's something about the way the lights go that like, even from the back row, you can see water, like just saliva flying out of singers' mouths that's just like cascading over the poor orchestra in the pit and into the first 5 or 6 rows.
Yeah, well, I wasn't up front.
Pay lots of money for that, right? So never sit in the front rows. So, you know, you want to be at least 10, 15 rows back.
Oh my God.
But yeah, like even the people in the front row that could afford it, like they could pay $4,000 for those seats, won't pay $4,000 for the seats because to them, like that's not what it should cost. It's an exchange transaction. If I'm going to go see Neil Sedaka, is he still alive? If I'm going to go see Neil Sedaka, I'm going to sit in, you know, I'm going to pay X number of dollars for these really good seats on my American Express card. And that's what the value of it is.
You made it through another episode of Nonprofit Everything. We're so glad you joined us and hope you got a nugget or two. If you did, why don't you share the episode with someone else you know that you think could use it or may have their own question that you want to make sure they have an opportunity to ask. It's a safe place to ask questions, right? We never share the name or who the question's coming from. I don't even get to see who the question's coming from. Andy's kind of the behind the scenes organizer of all of that stuff. And so it's very anonymous and we just answer it from our own experience and realistically, right? Like just kind of what we've seen, our own war stories and all that jazz. But we appreciate you just being with us again. And your call to action is to share. Just share. Share the love. Share the Nonprofit Everything podcast. And tag us when you do it or let us know if you did do it because we'll do something, Andy. I don't know what we'll do, but we'll give you like a gold star.
We need to make more stickers. We haven't had any stickers in a while. We should make some new stickers.
We could send you a Nonprofit Everything sticker. So there's your challenge for the day. Thanks again for listening.